At 77, I was accustomed to feeling invisible, but not like this, not sitting at a bus stop in a navy skirt suit with pinching heels, watching dusk envelop an empty street while awaiting a ride that would never arrive. They'd assured me it wouldn't be long after the reception. Over the phone, Mom Rachel had promised, "Just wait by the bus stop near Main and Spruce. We'll pick you up on our way back." I didn't question it, just nodded, even though she couldn't see me nodding, and despite the strange feeling in my heart when she said, after the reception, I convinced myself it was merely about scheduling and logistics. I even smiled when I hung up, and that was 6 hours ago. By now, the wedding must be long over, and the town had fallen silent. The few cars that went by didn't slow down, and there were no familiar faces. I had brought a wrapped gift, modest yet thoughtful, along with a small tin of shortbread I had baked that morning. They sat beside me on the bench like two small, useless offerings. I shifted on the wooden slats, my legs aching. I had never liked this bench. It faced the gas station, and the air always carried a faint scent of rubber and fried food. But Rachel had specified this stop, not the one by the park, and I didn't want to complicate things or be difficult. A boy on a bicycle passed by with earbuds in, not giving me a second glance, nor did anyone else. I checked my phone again. No signal, just the blinking, low battery icon. I had meant to charge it, but between baking, ironing the skirt, and writing a little note to Rachel, I had forgotten. There was a time, many times, when she would remind me, "Mom, don't forget your charger," she'd say, half smiling, half sighing, as if I were a child. But those days were over. I remembered when she told me about the wedding. "It'll be small," she'd said, "just family." Her fiancé's parents were paying, she explained, and there were limits. "You'll still be part of it. We'll figure something out," she had said. I should have noticed how her voice faltered, how she glossed over the details, but I wanted to believe her. I always wanted to believe. The final city bus rumbled past, its brakes screeching and lights cutting through the darkness, but it didn't pause. I watched its tail lights fade away, and something within me settled like a door closing. I wasn't forgotten. I was left out, which wasn't the same. The breeze turned chilly, and I clung to the shortbread tin, not for warmth, but as something to grasp. Behind me, laughter erupted from a house lining the street, a hearty sound suggesting a room full of voices, unaware of my existence. Rachel's words echoed in my mind, "Just wait at the bus stop." I waited all night until the streetlights flickered off and the sky lightened to gray, until a bakery van drove by, too early for morning, too late for night. I rose stiffly and began walking home, shoes in hand, back straight. I didn't cry, not yet, that would come later. By the time I reached home, the sun had started breaking through the clouds, illuminating the chipped pane on the porch rail and the weeds in the cracked steps. I paused, key in hand, reluctant to enter. The heaviness in my chest hadn't lifted. It merely settled like dust in an untouched room. Inside, the house faintly smelled of lemon polish and the oatmeal I'd left on the stove. I passed the cold pot, placed the shortbread on the counter, and gently set the unopened gift on the hall table. It looked absurd there, with its silver ribbon and neat square corners.
I had wrapped it so carefully, with a handwritten card inside for Rachel and Tom. Love always, Mom. I made tea without tasting it, then sat at the kitchen table and turned on my phone, plugging it into the wall. The screen came to life, notifications flooding in. One stopped me cold. A photo posted by Rachel's new sister-in-law, a girl I'd only met once. It showed the happy couple under strings of golden lights, surrounded by smiling faces. The caption read, "A perfect evening, just family." I gazed at the photo closely. There was Rachel in her cream lace dress, holding her bouquet just right. Tom was tall and awkward, smiling alongside his parents, his brothers, Rachel's cousins, her college friends, her godmother, everyone except me. Just family, the caption reiterated. I clutched the phone to my chest, as if to dull the pain from a simple sentence typed without a second thought, yet sharp enough to cut deep. I sought an alternative explanation, hoping she meant something else, that she hadn't noticed the caption or believed it wouldn't matter. Maybe the photographer needed something quick, and she planned to make it up to me later with a separate celebration, a brunch, or a quiet apology. But then I saw the following photos, and there was nothing separate. There was a dinner, a long candlelit table with name cards and linen napkins, laughter, dancing, toasts, and a slideshow of Rachel and Tom's life. Baby pictures, college days, their first apartment. Not a single image or mention of me. I had been carefully, deliberately excluded. I sat at the table, tea untouched, hands folded in my lap, trying to recall the last time Rachel looked at me without some hint of embarrassment. The last time she asked how I was, not what I could do. The last time I felt like her mother, not her burden. Once, many years ago, we were close after her father died.
It was just us two. I worked extra shifts at the clinic, skipped meals to buy her school books, and saved every spare dollar for her ballet lessons and braces. I didn't expect gratitude, just that we'd be home to each other. But slowly, subtly, she started changing. It began in college when she stopped calling, visited only on holidays, and eventually not at all, referring to my house as the old place, my clothes as quaint, and me as a bit much sometimes. She never said it outright, of course, but I saw it in her eyes, heard it. In her life, my size was no longer a source of strength or solace. I had become a burden. The wedding made it clear. I stood up from the table and went to the hallway mirror. The reflection showed a small, pale woman with dark circles under her eyes. Her hair, still thick, was pinned back in a manner Rachel always claimed appeared tired. Her hands were veined and dry, with a slight tremor, but her spine remained straight, and her eyes were steady despite everything. I picked up the gift from the table and unwrapped it. Inside was a photo album I had spent weeks assembling, filled with prints of Rachel's childhood photos that I had digitized and edited. Each page told a story: her first steps, her Halloween costume at 6, the time we built a snowman with mismatched gloves. I turned each page slowly and carefully, as if bidding farewell. Then I placed the album back in its box, took it to the trash bin, and let the lid close. My daughter had discarded me, and I was merely returning the gesture. I didn't truly sleep that night. I lay in bed with the lamp on, watching the shadows on the ceiling shift with the passing hours until around 3 a.m. I woke up and prepared toast but didn't eat it. At 5, I began writing a list, not of groceries or tasks, but of memories, not the happy ones, not birthdays or lullabies, but the others. Like when Rachel returned from college and insisted I stay in the kitchen while her new boyfriend visited. "You just make things awkward, Mom," she said, hurrying past me. I laughed, pretending not to hear. The time she borrowed $4,000 for a course she never completed, promising to repay me, but never mentioning it again. The day I brought her soup when she was ill, and she gently, kindly told me to text first next time. I kept writing until I ran out of paper. But then, of course, I also recalled the years before all that. The real years when she was little and everything between us was simple. I remembered the winter when she had croup, and I stayed up 3 nights holding her upright so she could breathe, sitting in the rocking chair, humming the same lullaby until my throat was sore. I remembered crafting her Halloween costumes by hand, sewing tiny ears onto a felt cap for her mouse outfit, and gluing feathers for the owl one. She used to proudly tell people, "My mom made this." I recalled when her father passed away, and my Tom, she had climbed into bed with me, crying herself to sleep while clutching my wrist as if fearing I'd disappear too. What had I done with those years? I had woven them into casseroles, school runs, and savings accounts. I had exchanged them for her security, for her comfort, for her opportunities. I convinced myself repeatedly that love meant giving, yet I never questioned what I was receiving. The ironic part is, I never desired much. A phone call, a birthday remembered without a reminder, a visit not scheduled like a dentist appointment, a conversation where I wasn't filtered for her comfort. Those were the things I missed, not the grand gestures, just the simple human interactions that make you feel seen. After breakfast, with tea and toast in silence, I went to the sideboard and took out the box containing all the old financial records. It was a habit from my nursing days. Everything labeled, everything in order. Inside were envelopes marked Rachel College, Rachel Carr, Rachel Down Payment. I opened one, a cashier's check from 2012 for $18,000 for the used Prius she wanted to navigate LA. "It's safer than the train, Mom," she'd said, "and I'll repay you in installments." But there were no installments. Another envelope held bank statements from when I co-signed her apartment lease, another with receipts from the wedding dress deposit she hadn't told her fiancé I had helped with. I stared at the numbers, trying to summon sharp anger or resentment, but instead I felt a weary awe. All this, and still not enough to feel like family. Yet I knew I'd do it all over again if she needed it, if she approached me as a daughter, not just as someone managing her image. But I wouldn't let myself be erased anymore, not silently. Just past noon, a message from Rachel buzzed on my phone. "Hi, Mom. Hope you got home okay. Sorry we couldn't come by. Things ran late, and Tom's parents had everyone over for drinks. Let's catch up soon. Love you." I stared at those words. No apology, no recognition. Just a gentle phrase wrapped around, as if it were a Band-Aid on an open wound. I didn't respond then. Instead, I stood up, put the kettle on again, and went to my bedroom closet. I reached for the top shelf where I kept a small wooden box, the kind with a lock, though the key was long lost. Inside were documents I hadn't looked at in years, my will, some insurance forms, and the note Tom had written before his surgery. It was the last one, with clumsy handwriting, telling me to take care of our daughter. She's soft inside, but strong where it counts. I used to believe that and thought I could guide her with love. But perhaps love without boundaries isn't guidance. Maybe it's just surrender. And I was done surrendering. On a Thursday, I went to the bank, not for anything urgent, but to see what I truly had and what I was still giving away. The young man at the counter blinked at me with that polite smile they give to older women who smell like lavender and carry handbags filled with tissues. I'd like to review my active transfers, I said steadily, and see which accounts are connected to my daughters. He hesitated. We can certainly review recurring transactions, ma'am. As for connected accounts, I'm listed as a secondary on her mortgage, I said calmly, and I cover her insurance policy, health, car, renters. I also make quarterly payments to her alma mater for a loan I co-signed 12 years ago. I can list them all if you need. His fingers hovered over the keyboard.
Let me just pull that up, Mrs. Morrison. I hadn't used that name in a while. Not since Tom passed. For years, I was just Rachel's mom, or simply Mom. Now I wanted my name back. He printed a tidy summary of my automatic payments, 3 pages, single-spaced. I sat in the consultation room, reading each line as if it were from someone else's story. Rent support, insurance, medical bills for Rachel's husband, who never called me anything but ma'am. A private tutoring fee for Lily, my granddaughter, who hadn't.
I'd been to the bank in months, yet there was a $129 transfer every couple of weeks for Rachel's dog groomer. I recalled her asking for this, claiming it was temporary until things settled. 18 months had passed since then. The last entry caught me off guard. A $2,000 payment set for next week. A honeymoon contribution subtly labeled as a gift. I hadn't even attended the wedding. I pressed my hand against the table. "Would you like to make changes, ma'am?" the banker asked gently. I looked at him closely. For the first time, a young man in a new suit with flawless skin, and I imagined his mother probably still packing his lunch when he visited. "Yes," I replied. "I want every outgoing payment reviewed, and most of them canceled, except for 2. The college savings plan for Lily, she's just 13, and the donation to the local shelter. Everything else stops today." He didn't bat an eyelash, just typed away. "And the mortgage?" he inquired. "You're a co-signer, but the payments come from your account. I'll inform my daughter she's responsible for her own roof from now on," I said. I signed the forms, my once elegant handwriting now slightly shaky, yet still strong enough to leave a mark. Back home, I stood in the hallway, gazing at the photos on the wall, not the formal ones, like weddings or graduations, but the quiet moments. Rachel as a baby, asleep on my chest, her muddy soccer uniform and toothless grin. Her high school play, where she stood in the background, half hidden in shadows. None of these were in her wedding slideshow. None of these memories accompanied her into adulthood. I brushed my fingers over the frames, trying to feel something again, then took them all down, not in anger, but to make room for myself. It's a strange realization when you understand your child has grown into someone who can hurt you, not out of malice, but convenience. Shame can be quiet, passive, well-dressed. It can appear as just family and resemble a polite smile that never quite reaches the eyes. That night, Rachel called. I didn't answer, not out of spite, but simply because I didn't. I didn't want to hear her voice until I could listen without trembling, so instead, I opened a new notebook and wrote what I want now on the first page. It took a while to jot down the first point, not to be useful, not to be needed, but to be treated as someone whose heart still beats. Then I made tea and for once sat with both hands around the cup, not holding it for anyone else. The next message from Rachel arrived the following morning. No greeting, no question, just Mom. Can we talk? There's been some confusion. I stared at the screen for ages. Then, calmer than expected, I put the phone down and made dry toast, no butter. My stomach wasn't craving indulgence. It wanted clarity. Confusion, she said. That's what they always called it when I wasn't invited, when I was left out of family emails or Lily's school recital. It was always a mishap, someone else's error, or something that fell through the cracks. I was the crack. I washed my cup slowly and gazed out the window. 2 houses down, the neighbor's daughter was planting flowers with her mother, a young woman, maybe in her late 20s, with the same head tilt and laugh as her mom. They looked like a pair, not identical, but united. You could see just by watching that they didn't need to practice love. They lived it. I dried my hands, returned to my chair, picked up the phone again, and opened Rachel's message. Still no follow-up. She hadn't called or asked how I was after being left on a street bench for hours. No apology, just confusion. I replied, "There's no confusion. Please direct any future inquiries to your own bank accounts, as mine no longer support you as of yesterday." I sent the message before I could soften the tone, and 5 minutes later, she called. I didn't pick up, imagining her pacing with her hand in her hair, her voice taking on a slightly high pitch when she felt trapped. She'd likely mention words like misunderstanding, unintentional, and logistics, and maybe even cry. Her tears always rendered me powerless, but tears didn't wait with you on a dark bench for 6 hours or rewrite captions to say, just family. So I turned off my phone. By midday, I heard the mailbox clatter. I wasn't expecting anything, but I checked anyway. It was just bills and a glossy wedding magazine with Rachel's name on it, something she had sent here a while back and never updated. I flipped through it indifferently before tossing it in the trash. In the afternoon, I opened the folder labeled Will and Legal and sat back at the kitchen table. This wasn't about revenge. It was about acknowledgement. I wasn't going to be the woman who leaves her savings, house, and everything to a daughter who considers her an afterthought, who would host brunches in this house and sweetly tell guests this was Mom's place, as if I were just an old vase. My name was still on everything, but not for much longer. I reviewed the outdated will. It was standard, with most going to Rachel and some to Lily for education, with Rachel as executor. I picked up the pen, made a note to call my lawyer, and another to contact the credit union about changing the house title. I wasn't doing this to cause her pain, but because I finally understood she could hurt me, and I couldn't allow that any longer. That evening, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees, the street quiet except for the low hum of a television through an open window. I watched the stars appear one by one and reflected on silence, not the lonely kind, but the powerful kind, the kind where no one is yelling or demanding or pulling your heart in all directions, just the kind where a woman sits with herself and finally knows that she doesn't require being picked up, invited, or captioned to exist. The lawyer's office was cozy, lined with dusty books and a dying foos plant in the corner. Mr. Harrington seemed older than I recalled, or perhaps I was finally seeing clearly. He adjusted his glasses as he skimmed through my file. "So," he said after a moment, "you want to make some changes to your estate plan?" "Yes," I replied, "significant ones." He nodded. "Still leaving something to your daughter?" I looked at him with my hands folded. "Not this time." He didn't react, just turned a page. "And your granddaughter?" That was why I was there, for Lily, the only one who remembered my birthday without prompting, the only one who called me from school just to say hi, who would curl up next to me on the couch and inquire about my childhood as if it mattered. She was 13 now, already entering that quiet teenage phase where affection becomes rare and words are carefully chosen. Yet there was still something authentic about her. She hadn't learned to push people into the background. "She's the only one I want to leave anything to," I said. "A college fund?" he asked. "Yes, but more than that, I want to establish a trust." He raised an eyebrow. "A full trust with early access?" "She'll be 18 in 5 years. If I'm not around, I want her to know someone believed in her, not for her usefulness, but for her kindness." We spent the next hour drafting paperwork. I gave instructions in a calm, measured voice, surprised at how composed I felt, not triumphant, not bitter, just clear. Before I left, Mr. Harrington looked up from his notes. "Mrs. Morrison, I see these cases more often than you'd think. Parents disrespected, written off, children forgetting who raised them." I smiled faintly. "I didn't raise Rachel to forget. I raised her to survive. Maybe that's the same thing." He handed me a copy of the draft documents and escorted me to the door. "You're doing something brave." "No," I said. "I'm just done doing something foolish." At home, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared. At Lily's name printed boldly on the trust folder, I imagined her as she was at 6, freckled, missing front teeth, asking me to read the same book repeatedly. I hoped that girl was still within her. I hadn't told Rachel about the trust yet, not to keep it secret, but for clarity. If she ever inquired, I'd explain. But for now, I wanted it to remain straightforward, a quiet boundary drawn. I walked to the living room and found an old photo of Lily and me at the beach, her hand in mine, both of us squinting in the sunlight. I dusted the frame and placed it on the mantel where Rachel's picture used to be. The house didn't feel lighter, but it felt more like mine. The next morning, I sent a letter, not an email or a text, but a handwritten letter. "Dear Lily," it began, "I don't know when you'll read this, but I want you to have something that belongs solely to you, not burdened by conditions, guilt, or expectations. I want you to use it well, not because I expect it, but because I trust you. I always have. I signed it not with love, Grandma, but for the girl who never made me feel invisible, M." I folded the paper, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it into the trust folder. Later that day, the doorbell rang. I didn't move at first, thinking it was a delivery, but it rang again, more insistently. I opened the door to find Rachel standing there, flushed and breathless, holding her phone like it was a badge. "Mom, we need to talk," she said. I looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel smaller than her. "I'm not angry," I said, "but this can't be fixed with talking." She opened her mouth and I gently raised a hand. "Not now." I gently closed the door, not with a slam, but with a decisive click. Although I didn't lock it, I also didn't reopen it. That evening, I ended up in the attic, not searching for anything in particular, just standing amidst old boxes, surrounded by the scent of dust and cedar. It's peculiar how you start tidying when your heart feels overwhelmed. I hadn't been up there for years, not since Tom's last winter, when we stored the Christmas decorations and never took them out again. I sat on an old footstool, dusting off a box labeled Martha Nursing Days. My handwriting was slanted and careful. Inside were remnants of a different life, a tarnished stethoscope, hospital badges, a few certificates. In one corner of the box were photographs of me in white scrubs, looking younger and more focused, tired in a way unrelated to age. I used to be competent and respected, trusted with people's lives. Now I was the woman people forgot to pick up, the one they apologized for in hushed tones. I found another box labeled Tom and M. I opened it slowly to find letters and birthday cards. One read, "You always know how to bring me back to myself. Love, Tom." I held it for a long time. He would have known what to say now, or perhaps he wouldn't have said anything at all, just poured 2 cups of coffee, sat beside me, and let the silence encompass everything words couldn't. That was his way. His dignity was quiet, yet never weak. I realized I hadn't uttered his name in weeks, maybe months. "Tom," I said now, my voice low like a secret. "I'm sorry I lost myself." I leaned back, my hand resting on the box as if it were a warm shoulder. I hadn't always been this diminished version of myself. I had once danced barefoot in the rain, laughed so hard I startled the dog, fought for patients when the hospital system tried to ignore them. I had sharp opinions and never needed to be sweet to be good. So, when did I stop being Martha? The first crack appeared when Rachel turned 13 and told me, with the certainty only a teenager possesses, that I didn't understand. I began tiptoeing around her moods after that, softening my voice, avoiding the clothes she deemed frumpy. Then Tom died, and I poured everything into her. My grief remained shapeless, while hers took form. By the time she reached college, I feared upsetting her, worried she'd drift further away, so I agreed to everything, the car, the rent, the silent disappointments. I stayed useful, thinking it would keep me needed, but being needed and being loved are not the same thing. Downstairs, I opened the wardrobe and took out the navy dress I'd worn to the wedding that never happened. It was still on its hanger, tissue paper from the store crumpled at the closet's bottom. I put it on slowly, smoothing the fabric over my hips. I didn't look pathetic in it. I looked composed, like a woman who had waited in the cold and learned something in the silence. I sat at the vanity and brushed my hair, still thick, still silver. Rachel once offered to pay for me to get it done properly, but I had said no. Gray is not shameful. Gray remembers. That night, I took out an old journal and wrote one sentence across a fresh page. I used to be someone, I think. I remained awake, not having slept much, but when I did manage to rest, it was peaceful. Upon waking, I felt a steady calmness within me that didn't need approval. My phone was filled with unread messages from Rachel, yet I didn't open a single one. At the pharmacy, I waited in line behind a woman with a toddler and a weary look. The child kept reaching for candy bars, and she continuously put them back while searching for her insurance card with her other hand. I stood quietly, my prescriptions tucked in a white paper bag under my arm, observing her manage the chaos with practiced composure. When my turn arrived, the pharmacist greeted me with the forced cheerfulness of someone halfway through a long shift. "Oh, Mrs. Morrison, you have, pickup for Rachel's household as well. Just a moment." I blinked, not having requested anything. "It's her husband's prescription. It's under your account with auto pay set." My fingers tightened on the counter. "Can you cancel that?" I asked calmly. The pharmacist hesitated. "You're authorized?" "Yes, are you sure? It's a monthly refill." I offered a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Yes, I'm sure. If there are any issues, Rachel can handle them. They recently got married, so I imagine they're doing well." She nodded, avoided eye contact, tapped some keys, and handed me a receipt. "It's done," she said. Outside, I sat on a bench near the bus stop. Not that bench, but a different one in front of the library, under a yellowing maple tree. The air smelled of ink in late summer. I hadn't said no so clearly and unapologetically in years, but as I sat there, the fear I anticipated didn't arrive. No trembling hands, no wave of guilt, no frantic mental rehearsals of explanations. Just a quiet, heavy calm, the kind that settles when a door finally closes, long overdue. That evening, Rachel called again. I didn't answer, but I listened to her voicemail. "Mom, I saw the payment didn't go through for David's medication. That's fine. I'll manage it, but I wish you'd just told me. We can communicate, you know. It doesn't have to be this way. I feel there's been a barrier between us recently, and I'm just puzzled." Puzzled. That word had become her defense, her excuse for avoiding what she didn't want to confront. I didn't reply. Instead, I took out my journal and wrote, "When someone erects a wall to keep you out, it's not your duty to tear it down. It's your duty to stop waiting outside for an invitation to enter." The following morning, I visited the market for the first time in years, shopping solely for myself. I didn't buy Lily's favorite cereal or the imported coffee Rachel liked. I didn't check prices with someone else's needs in mind. Instead, I selected a small wheel of brie, a jar of fine marmalade, a bottle of dry rosé, a new potted basil plant for my kitchen windowsill, and a paperback novel I hadn't read in years. At the checkout, the clerk smiled and remarked, "Looks like you're planning a quiet evening." "I am," I replied, "and it's going to be lovely." Back home, I lit a candle, not for ambiance, but because I wanted to. I poured a glass of wine, made toast with marmalade and cheese, and sat in my kitchen with the sun warming the floor tiles. For the first time, the house didn't feel like it was waiting for anyone. It just felt filled with me. Mid-morning, a message arrived, short and sharp, like a stone through glass. "Mom, what's happening?"
The mortgage payment bounced, and so did Lily's school bill. "Are you okay? Please respond." I didn't reply. Not to punish her, not out of anger. It wasn't that old frantic anger. It was simply that nothing in the message asked how I was. Only what was happening, why things weren't working, where the money was. The concern in "Are you okay?" felt hollow, like it was added for structure, not sentiment. An hour later, a second message came. "I'm serious, Mom. This is starting to affect our credit. If something is wrong, you need to tell me." And when I still didn't answer, "I don't understand why you're acting like..."
after all I've done for you," she said, making me chuckle. I laughed out loud in my kitchen, a place that had always been quiet and weary until recently. It was a laugh born not from joy, but necessity, a sharp burst of disbelief that had nowhere else to go. All she'd done for me? I stood, walked to the filing cabinet, and pulled out the bulkiest folder. Rachel's support tabs, notes, and copies of checks spanning 25 years, rent, tuition, medical bills, groceries, that failed business venture she promised would succeed in 6 months. All she had done, the only thing Rachel had done for me in the past decade, was to ask for less than usual when she felt a twinge of guilt. Still holding the file, I moved into the living room and sat in Tom's old chair, tracing the edge of the envelope, not with anger or sorrow, but with finality. I was done with this game. That evening, she called again. I watched the screen light up, then fade, then light up once more. I ignored it. An hour later, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Peering through the peephole, I saw her car. She stood there, jacket thrown on, arms crossed, phone in hand. I didn't open the door immediately, not out of cruelty, but to measure something within myself, to see if the trembling would start again. It didn't. When I finally turned the knob, her face lit up for a moment, then fell as she saw mine. "Mom," she began, "we need to talk." "Do we? I don't get it. Everything's a mess."
I had to call the school and postpone tuition. I'm not funding your life anymore, Rachel.
She blinked. But why? I stepped outside, gently closing the door behind me, standing with her on the porch. "Because I waited for you," I said, at a bus stop in heels, with a gift in my lap, for hours. She exhaled sharply, as if I'd hit her. "You knew it wasn't intentional. I told you we'd come back." "But you didn't," I replied. "And I saw the photos, Rachel. Just family. That wasn't from me, but it involved you, and you didn't change it." Silence stretched between us. "You left me sitting there," I continued, "and then acted like it never happened. And now what? Now I'm a problem to fix, a task to reactivate." She looked down at the porch floor, like a child being scolded. "I thought you loved helping," she said quietly. I took a slow breath. "I do, when it's help, when it's love. But what you've wanted from me lately isn't help, Rachel. It's maintenance." Her eyes shimmered. "Mom, I didn't mean—" "I know," I said. That's the worst part." She reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "I'm not angry," I said, "but I'm done." And then I did what I never thought I could. I walked back inside and gently closed the door behind me. She didn't knock again. I called Mr. Harrington the next morning and told him it was time to finalize everything. The trust for Lily, the new version of the will, the updated deed for the house. He didn't ask questions, just gave me a time slot, 2:15 that afternoon. When I arrived, the receptionist offered me tea, and for the first time in years, I accepted without asking if it would be inconvenient. It was a small thing, but it mattered. I sat on the upholstered bench and drank my tea slowly, not because I had to wait, but because I finally wasn't rushing for anyone. In Mr. Harrington's office, the stack of papers was already neatly arranged. "It's all here," he said, tapping the folder. "The new will remove your daughter entirely, as discussed. The trust for Lily is clear and protected, and the property deeds now place the house solely in your name, with no joint beneficiaries. You're fully autonomous again." Good, I remarked, picking up the pen. It amazed me how simple it felt. No shaking, no doubts, just the ink flowing on paper. He observed me signing each document, nodding slightly with each one. You're not the first parent I've assisted with this, he mentioned softly. But I wish more did it before they reached their breaking point. I'm not broken, I replied. He smiled knowingly. Exactly. On my way out, I noticed a mother and son in the waiting room. She wore a soft coat, and he was in a blazer that seemed too large for his frame. She gently patted his arm as he pretended not to see. I watched her smile, not with pain, but with patience. I used to be like that, but when patience stretches too thin, it turns into something else, something akin to denial. Once home, I opened the windows to let in the breeze, something I hadn't done in months, always concerned about Rachel's allergies during her visits, constantly adjusting the house for others' comfort. The air carried the scent of jasmine and distant barbecue smoke, and it felt like mine. The phone rang again shortly after 5. This time I answered, not because I was ready to forgive, but because the silence had spoken sufficiently. Rachel's voice was tentative. Hi, I wasn't sure you'd answer. I saw the legal papers, the trust, the deed change. I guess you were serious. I was, I replied. There was a pause. You could have told me first, she said. I did, just not in the way you preferred. I didn't realize things were that bad, she admitted. You didn't realize, I said gently, because you never had to. Another pause followed. Then her voice softened. So what now? We stopped talking? You're just finished with me? I'm not done loving you, Rachel, I explained. But I'm done with the illusion that love equals servitude. I heard her breath catch. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Then say nothing, I advised. Instead, think. I hung up before she could find more words. That evening, I pulled out a recipe card from an old tin in my kitchen, one I hadn't used since Tom passed away. It was his favorite, beef stew with red wine and thyme, a comforting dish, slow and warming. I cooked it for myself, not for visitors or holidays, but simply because I wanted its aroma to fill my home. I simmered and set the table for one, my plate, my wine glass, my bread warmed in the oven. I didn't light a candle because I didn't need any proof that the meal was special. I already knew it was. Lorraine arrived just after lunch, uninvited and unannounced, just the way I preferred her visits. She walked into my kitchen as if she owned it, placed a tin of oatmeal cookies on the counter, and said, I thought you were either crying or thriving. Judging by the smell, it's thriving. I laughed, genuinely, not the forced laugh people use to get through awkward moments. I made stew yesterday, I remarked, and no, I haven't cried recently. She raised an eyebrow. You always cry, even when the lilacs bloom too soon. I'm learning, I replied, to feel things without offering them up like gifts. She nodded, took a seat across from me, and poured herself tea without asking. That's the kind of friend Lorraine always was, the kind who knew where the mugs were and didn't apologize for being part of the furniture. I heard from Dora, whose niece works at the credit union, she said. Seems your daughter's been upset over some frozen accounts. I didn't flinch. That's true. And I didn't fix it. Lorraine sipped her tea, observing me. Well, I'll be damned, she said. You finally put your foot down. It wasn't a hammer, I replied. More like a set of keys. I just stopped unlocking the same old doors. She grinned. You were always the softer one between us. I would have cut her off years ago. I kept thinking I was helping, I said. You were, but helping isn't healing. Sometimes it's hiding. I looked at my hands. Steady now. No trembling. I should have told her before making changes. And did you? She asked. I did, just not in the way she wanted. Lorraine leaned back in her chair. You know what I think? Do I want to? I asked. I think you forgot who you were. You spent so long being Rachel's mother, Tom's wife, the nice lady from the clinic, that you left Martha in the pantry, next to the good china, and your real opinions. I didn't respond, not because she was wrong, but because she was right.
And now she added, I shrugged. Now I cook stew for myself. I open windows without needing permission. I jot things down. She tapped the table with a smile. And finally, we sat quietly for a while, sipping tea as the sun warmed the kitchen floor through the window. Lorraine reached for a cookie and glanced at me. Are you ever going to let her back in? She asked. I don't know, I replied honestly. I still love her. I always will. But love doesn't mean access. She nodded slowly. Amen to that. Before she left, she hugged me tighter than usual, her scent like lilacs and old paper. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I'm proud of me too, I said, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a lie. After she was gone, I stood in the doorway watching the street. A breeze rustled through the trees. No cars, no expectations. Just the sound of my house, my breath, and a peace that didn't need permission to exist. I thought, maybe this is what healing sounds like. Not applause, not closure, just silence that no longer hurts. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a gas bill and a flyer for discounted lawn care. I almost missed it plain white. My name printed in a young, unsure hand, no return address. I knew before I opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of lined paper, torn from a notebook, the handwriting messy, the ink smudged in places, just one short paragraph. Grandma, are you okay? I don't know what happened between you and Mom, but I miss you.
I keep thinking about when we used to make blueberry muffins. You always let me lick the bowl. I hope you're all right. I love you, Lily. No questions about money. No updates from Rachel's world. Just the voice of a 13-year-old who hadn't yet learned to polish pain into silence. I read the letter 3 times, then placed it on the kitchen table and sat beside it as if it might vanish. I didn't cry, but my throat swelled with something warm, sharp, and familiar. I pulled out a note card from the drawer, the kind I kept for birthdays and sympathy messages, and wrote carefully. Slowly, in the neatest handwriting I could muster, I wrote, Dear Lily, I'm okay. I've just needed some peace to think. I miss you too. I remember the muffins and still have the bowl. Yes, the batter is just as sweet. When you're ready, come visit and we'll bake something new. Love always, Grandma. I walked to the mailbox in my garden, raised the red flag, and slipped the envelope inside. The wind rustled the lilac bush as I headed back to the house. Inside, the kitchen appeared just as I'd left it. My mug, my journal, Lily's note like a candle on the table. I sat down and read her words again. In them, I didn't hear Rachel. There was no debt, guilt, or performance. Just the one thing I thought I'd lost: recognition. That afternoon, I tidied up the guest room, the one Rachel always claimed she disliked because of the creaky bed and sheets that smelled of old soap. I changed them, not for Rachel, but for Lily. I fluffed the pillows, opened the window, and set an old fairy tale book on the nightstand. Later, I baked muffins, not blueberry this time, but raspberry and white chocolate. I left one on a plate beside the letter on the table, as if to say, "See, I still remember how to be someone's home." The doorbell didn't ring that day or the following one, but I didn't monitor the street like before. I didn't equate silence with absence, because this time it felt like waiting for something that might truly arrive, and that was enough. Before bed, I illuminated a small lamp in the guest room just in case. Sometimes love isn't about a grand return. Sometimes it's about leaving the light on. She neither called nor texted. She just showed up. It was Saturday, just after 2, when I heard the soft knock, neither urgent nor demanding, just present like a question gently posed with hope. I opened the door, and there she stood, Lily, with a backpack slung over one shoulder, jacket zipped up to her chin, hair more untidy than Rachel would have ever allowed. We exchanged glances for a moment, and then she gave a shy, slightly crooked smile. "I came for muffins," she said. I stepped aside silently and let her in. She didn't rush into my arms or cry. She walked directly to the kitchen like every summer since she was 5, dropped her bag by the door, and looked at the mixing bowls on the counter. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to," she said. I handed her the wooden spoon. "You'll still lick the bowl," she grinned. "Always." We didn't discuss Rachel at first. We measured sugar, cracked eggs, and picked raspberries from the small bush outside, her sleeves rolled up, my apron hanging off her frame. She asked if I still had the old board game we used to play, the one with plastic castles. I did. We played 2 rounds while the muffins baked, and she beat me both times. It wasn't until the kitchen was filled with the scent of vanilla and berries that she finally asked, "Are you mad at her?" I paused, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "No," I said. "I'm disappointed. There's a difference." She looked at me seriously, in a way that reminded me too much of her mother. "She said you were being unfair, that you shut her out." I sat next to her and shut her out, but only after years of being asked to be silent in my own life. She nodded slowly and got upset whenever I asked questions. "You don't have to be afraid to ask," I said. She was silent for a while, then softly said, "I don't think she intends to be mean. She just forgets that people aren't here for her convenience." I glanced at my granddaughter, only 13, but already aware of truths most adults ignore. "I think you're right," I agreed. We enjoyed muffins in the garden, and she inquired about Grandpa Tom, wanting to know what he was like at her age. I shared how he once jumped off a roof into a haystack and broke his wrist, and how he despised the color orange because it reminded him of hospital scrubs. We laughed, and she said, "I think I want to visit more often." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I gently tucked her hair behind her ear and said, "You always can, no pretense." She smiled again, and, for the first time, it was entirely her own smile, not her mother's version or one she'd practiced. We spent the rest of the day quietly reading, folding laundry, and listening to old records. She found my costume jewelry box and wore 3 bracelets at once, just like she used to. When I walked her to the bus station that evening, she squeezed my hand before boarding. "I'm glad you wrote to me," she said. "I'm glad you listened."
As the bus departed, I stood on the sidewalk, watching the back of her head through the window. She didn't turn around, but I didn't need her to. I knew she would return. This time, no promises were necessary. She came back the following weekend and the one after that. No permission slips or explanations. Just Lily arriving with a backpack and that familiar gentle knock. She helped me plant bulbs in the yard, learned how to roast a chicken, and asked if she could photograph the old recipe cards for a school project. I agreed. We seldom discussed Rachel. Occasionally, Lily would mention her in passing. A test her mom was worried about, a tense dinner, a slammed door. But mostly, she talked about books, her favorite teacher, a boy in math class who made her laugh but wore too much cologne. She was growing into her own person, not a replica of Rachel, just Lily. Then, one Thursday morning, I opened the front door to find Rachel on the porch. She appeared thinner and exhausted, wearing a coat too fancy for its function, holding a grocery bag as if it were a peace offering. Inside were chamomile tea, scones from the bakery she used to ridicule, and a magazine with a sticky note. Thought you'd like the garden tips. She didn't smile. Hi, Mom, she said. I didn't step back or open the door wider. Why are you here? I asked. I wanted to see the house, she replied.
I just wanted to see it again. You lived here. You know what it looks like. I didn't mean the walls. I crossed my arms. Then come in and say what you need to say. She entered slowly, her eyes surveying the hallway like a stranger. She glanced at the coat rack and the frame cross-stitch by the kitchen, reading, "Home is where your voice matters." A piece Lily had made for me last month. You changed things, she remarked. I finally made space. She sat at the kitchen table, leaving the bag untouched. Lily talks about you all the time. I didn't expect that. Because you didn't think I had anything left to offer? That's not true. But it's how you lived. Her mouth tightened into a line. Tight line. You stopped helping. No, I said. I stopped enabling. She exhaled slowly, as if trying not to break. I've been overwhelmed. I thought you understood. You always did before. I did for years, but then you left me on a bench on your wedding day. You let others call that family while I sat in silence. She didn't argue for once. I was ashamed, she finally said, of how it would look. You, the old house, your dresses. I thought you wouldn't want to come. That's not shame, I said. That's cowardice. Shame would have brought you back to me. She looked down, her hands twisting the sleeve of her coat. I didn't know how to fix it. I nodded. So you left it for me to handle, like everything else. I'm sorry, she said, softly, and not very clearly, but she said it. I watched her for a long time, the girl I'd raised, the woman who had forgotten I was more than a role to play. She hadn't aged as much as she had hardened. You're not too late, I said, but you'll have to start from the beginning. She looked up. Not with Lily, not with your husband, with me. What does that mean? It means you show up without asking for anything. You listen. You learn who I am now, not just who I was when you needed me. She nodded, uncertain. I walked to the door. You're welcome to visit, but not to stay. Not yet. She stepped onto the porch, carrying the untouched bag of scones. As she turned to leave, she paused. Lily loves you, she said. I know, I replied, because she still sees me. I closed the door, not to shut her out, but because dignity, once reclaimed, has its own quiet boundary. The house is quiet again, not the silence of waiting or absence or erased names, but the quiet of something earned, the kind of quiet that fills a space when you no longer need to prove your place in it. Lily visits twice a month now. She bakes on her own, folds laundry without being asked, and once she sat across from me and said, "I think you're the bravest person I know." I didn't respond. I simply held her hand, letting the words settle where they needed to. Rachel called last week. She didn't ask for money or offer excuses. She mentioned that Lily had changed recently, becoming more confident and outspoken. "I think she's learning it from you," she said. I didn't reply with, "I hope so," just good. Rachel still approaches me cautiously, like a child navigating a frozen pond. She hasn't sought forgiveness, and I haven't given it. We're slowly building something, one conversation at a time. It doesn't have to be perfect, just authentic. Last Sunday, I planted bulbs in the front yard, tulips, crocuses, daffodils, flowers that bloom at different times and don't demand applause. My knees ached and my hands trembled with the shovel, but I persisted. A neighbor passed by and slowed down, commenting, "Spring's going to be beautiful here." "Yes," I replied, "it's already begun." Inside, the house holds my breath, music, photos, and light. No one edits or asks me to diminish myself anymore. When I pass the hallway mirror, I pause for a moment to look, not for approval, but because, for the first time in a long while, I see a woman I recognize. She's not angry, not waiting, not silent because someone told her to be. She's quiet because peace doesn't need to shout. Perhaps this is the story I was meant to tell, not about being left behind, but about the life I discovered afterward.
If you're reading this and someone made you feel insignificant in a space you created, don't wait for the door to open or for them to remember you. Stand up, dust off the bench, and start walking. You were never meant to be a footnote. You are the entire story. If this story reached you at the right moment, share it. Someone else might be sitting at that bus stop, still believing they were forgotten.